I've been trying to puzzle out since Trump took office exactly what the role of the kind of more political commentary that I was doing on my podcast now is. Because, as you know, and like you, I've been a fervent adversary of the woke, cancel culture, progressive, Marxist, resentful, race-baiting mob for, 10 years. And there's been some victories achieved, great victories achieved in the last couple of years. Like, well, for example, it looks to me like the back of the climate apocalypse narrative has been broken. It's still dangerous. The guy who just got elected in Canada, Mark Carney, the new prime minister, he's a net zero advocate. And the Labour Party is still pushing that in the UK, and Europe's still possessed by it. But it's really half the people online now, I think, know it's a scam. And you can say that quite publicly, like I just did, without, risking your professional neck. The whole podcast that I did with Joe Rogan, when I first really broadly broached the climate narrative problem, that was submitted to the College of Psychologists as a complaint against my license, and they upheld that as a valid complaint. So in any case, that's changed, and Trump was elected, and there's a conservative sweep, and at least in the United States, and in the UK, the Reform Party just did extremely well at the level of council elections, and I don't know what you think about the AfD in Germany, but and I presume they have their problems, but there's certainly conservative voices being heard in Germany and in France and in Sweden and in Italy and in Hungary and in Poland. And so the question is now, what do you think the crucial issues are for conservative commentators like yourself, and maybe even more broadly for the Daily Wire? And where's your interest gravitating with regards to what kind of issues you want to focus on and comment on?
I think that there are some issues that we've been intensely focused on that, to your point, will become a little bit less relevant because maybe the left is slowly backing away from them a little bit, at least for now. And maybe they'll rear their ugly heads again in the future in some other form. So I think that is happening. But I also think that the proclamations of the death of wokeness were premature. They were premature. I don't think that wokeness is dead. I don't think that, and maybe we'll come up with a different name for it. The name doesn't matter that much. But whatever you want to call it, leftism, let's just say more broadly, it's not going away. They're not just going to pack up their stuff and leave. They're still here. So the fight very much continues. It's just that it moves away from some of these. So for example, you mentioned climate change. The trans issue is still really important, but I do think that we've really had one cultural and now even legislative and even judicial victory after another, with more to come. I think the Supreme Court's going to rule very soon in favor of the Tennessee law banning child castration. I think that's going to happen. So we are winning on that issue. We're gaining ground, and I don't want to speak famous last words and all that. I don't see how the trans activists can regain the ground they've lost, because the trans activists, a lot of their progress was based on not having persuaded people that they were right. They never really persuaded anyone. They had scared everyone into being quiet. But in the last couple of years, what's happened culturally is that people have realized that, there's nothing to be afraid of. I can stand up and say, there's men and women, only women have babies. Yeah, of course you don't let men in the women's room, that's crazy. Don't let men on women's sports. Don't do that to kids, with these drugs and surgeries. So people aren't afraid anymore, and they realize that they can just say that. And I don't think you can put that toothpaste back in the tube exactly if you're a trans activist. So I think that issue is still important, but it recedes a little bit in a good way because we've been so victorious. So then it goes to your question of, well, what are the battlefields left to fight on? And I think in some ways the battle becomes more fundamental. Maybe not more fundamental because the question of biological sex is about as fundamental as it gets.
Yeah, it's pretty fundamental.
It's pretty fundamental.
Yeah, that's kind of a foundation. Yeah. That one.
But there are other foundational issues, and I think the fight moves to there. big things like protecting the family. What are the institution of the family? What are the forces that are destroying marriages or convincing people to not get married in the first place? The birth rate is declining. We still have millions of babies being killed by abortion every year. So what are the, that's a battlefield. Now, it's always been a battlefield, but I think that there's an even greater focus on that. What are the forces that are driving that? I think one of the big forces, if we put a label on it, is feminism. And I think that if I were to, put on my Nostradamus hat and try to predict, I think kind of the latter half of the 2020s, that feminism and the war of the sexes and these sorts of things, I think that becomes a focus in the way that LGBT and trans were, say, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, the fact that men and women are so split, especially when they're young, in their political affiliation worldwide, and that split seems to be growing, it is evidence for exactly that claim. Like, there's a real reckoning that needs to be had with regard to the resentful feminists, because it is an ethos of resentment like Marxism.